So here I want to talk about question number 3 in homework 2. For the first part, I already entered all these blanks in calculating the free cash flow, because this part is very similar to the first part for question number 3, which I already made and posted a video recording. So if you are not sure how we get these numbers, you can just go back to question number 3, the recording, and to find out more details. So I just checked the answer. It seems like we got it right. So then, because this part I want to emphasize the financing cash flow part. And for the financing cash flow, we know we can have two different types of cash flows. One goes to shareholders, the other one goes to creditors. And for the cash flows which go to shareholders, we can further have dividends and the change in common stock. So let me first find out dividends. Common stock dividends. From the firm's perspective, that should be a negative cash flow. So where can I find out? This part actually requires some calculation, because if you go to the two financial statement, income statement and balance sheet, you can see that the dividend is not directly given. So that means we need to find out this number first. So how can we find out dividends? We can use the let me use a new chart. We can use this fact. We know the bottom line of income statement is net income, right? But once we have net income can further equal dividend plus the addition to retained earnings. So that's an identity, right? Net income is equal to dividend plus addition to retained earnings. Addition to retained earnings, this part basically is the incremental retained earnings based on the balance sheet. So it's the change. The triangle sign here stands for the change in retained earnings. So that plus dividend gives me net income. So solving out this, we can find out dividend. Dividend equals net income minus incremental retained earnings. So where do we find out net income? Obviously that's from the income statement. And where do we find out this number? The incremental retained earnings, we can find out from the balance sheet. Hence, we can solve out dividend here. So now let's go back to the question. For net income, we know we should find it from the income statement for 2012. That's 182. So this is 182. And what about incremental retained earnings? And that part we need to find from the 2 years balance sheet. It's incremental. So we know the retained earnings. Here we know that each number on a balance sheet is cumulative. So incremental means that it's the difference. So retained earnings going up from 700 to 807, so the incremental needs to be 107. So that's the incremental, 107. Hence the dividend equals that, which gives me 75. So 75, that's the dividend. But we need to provide the correct sign, right? Dividend, because it's paid from the firm to the shareholders. So from the firm's perspective, that should be a negative cash flow or cash outflow. But then the second cash flow, which can occur from the shareholders' perspective, is the increase in common stock, right? That means that if the firm issues more common stock, so if the firm issues more common stock, the firm is collecting money from shareholders. So from the firm's perspective, that's a positive cash flow. So then we go to balance sheet, find out the incremental common stock. Common stock actually doesn't go up, stays the same. So it's going to be the 0 for this year. So this is 0. So the next item for the common stock is the purchase common stock. So the firm can do two things: increase new issuance common stock. The firm can also repurchase some of the existing common stock. So if the firm does that, obviously the firm is paying the shareholders money. So from the firm's perspective, the repurchased common stock is a negative cash flow, which is a cash outflow. So what's the number here? Do we have any repurchased common stock? Based on the balance sheet, it doesn't look like we have that item, which we should assume this is 0. So then that's down for the shareholders' cash flow. So then the second part of the financing cash flow is from the creditor's perspective. So from the creditor's perspective, we know the first cash flow that can take place is the interest expense. So we find out the interest paid to lenders. So obviously that's from the firm's perspective, that's a negative cash flow. So interest paid, we need to find out that number from the income statement. So from the income statement, interest expense, that's 56. So again, from the firm's perspective, that's a negative cash flow. The second cash flow from the creditor's perspective is similar to the second cash flow from the shareholder's perspective, which is the increase in the interest-bearing debt. So interest-bearing debt may include both notes payable and long-term debt. Looks like for this specific question we don't have any long-term debt. So let me double check. Go to the balance sheet to find out. Yeah, we do have bonds. Bonds are long-term debt, but it doesn't go up. It doesn't change, so it doesn't bring any impact on the financing cash flow. That's why in this drop-down menu we only have the increase in the notes payable. So for that part, based on the balance sheet, it's a 146, right? Going up from 0 to 146. So it's going up, which means that the firm issues more notes payable during the year. So if the firm issues more notes payable, from the firm's perspective, that's a positive cash flow, 146. So the financing cash flow is simply the sum of all these cash flows here. So let me pull out my calculator. 75, negative 75, and then subtract 56, then add 146, and that gives me 15. And actually it has to be 15. As we said, there's an identity between free cash flow and the cash flow, financing cash flow. And financing cash flow basically is the negative of free cash flow. So in other words, the sum of these two has to be 0. So since free cash flow is negative 15, so financing cash flow has to be positive 15. And you can use this fact to check whether you got the right answer. Looks like we got the right answer, but maybe just let me make sure about that. Check my answer. Excellent. Good. So I guess that's it for this question. I hope that my point of using this question is take that example to show you actually how to get the common stock dividends. I believe that's probably the most challenging part to answer this question. In addition to giving the correct sign to the various cash flow items. Alright, so that's it for this discussion.